Good morning. Welcome to Practical Project Management, the core. Today we're going to be talking about core functionality for project management. Okay. All right, a little bit of technical difficulty, but I think we've got it. Let's get started. If you haven't had a webinar with me before, I want to make sure that you have some feeling of security that I actually know what I'm talking about. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about me before we get started. My name is Kim Wasson. My educational background is a bachelor's in computer science from Cal State and a master's from Stanford. I have had positions in Silicon Valley from line engineer up to vice president before I started my consulting business, and that was with companies as big as IBM and eBay, to Santa Cruz Operation, General Magic, and quite a few startups. So all different sizes of company, a lot of different kinds of positions, but I used project management concepts, including what we're going to talk about today, in every position in every company. So these are pretty applicable across the boards. I started Ivy Bay Consulting about 10 years ago, and my specialties are providing tailored solutions particularly for project and program management, and I do coaching there. I spend a lot of time untangling difficult projects. I do a lot of process engineering and process improvement. I help folks with time management, and I do work a lot with distributed and international teams. More information is on my website. Feel free to check it out at www.ivybay.com. So now let's get started with the real stuff. What shall we talk about today? We're going to do a brief review of the basic concepts in case you haven't had the prior webinars, so that we're all on the same page. I'm going to give you some basic information about the project that we're going to use as our guideline to talk about these core concepts. So we're going to talk about the goals, assumption, vision, and tasks. Those are concepts we've covered before. We're going to talk about them specifically in terms of this project we're putting together. We'll talk about the calendar for the project, the dependencies for the tasks and durations, who's going to do the tasks, and then I'm going to show you how it all comes together, and we're going to do that kind of in pieces so you can see how a core project plan is built. So let's get the basic concept review kind of out of the way, make sure we're all on the same page. Tasks are logical pieces of work that have been identified. Often, tasks are broken into subtasks, and then the original task serves as a grouping function. Typically, once we get a plan together, we'll refer to those all as tasks. But for the concept, it's important to understand that tasks can be broken down further. Dependencies are identification of which tasks can't start until another task finishes. If you are painting your bathroom, you have to buy the paint before you can actually start painting. So that's a dependency. Most dependencies are what's called finish to start. You have to finish one task before the dependent task can start. There are also start to start dependencies and finish to finish dependencies, and we're actually going to go through some of those in the course of this webinar so you can see how they really work. Resources are whatever you need to get the job done. Lots of times those are people. You may have furniture you need. You may need some contacts. You may need money. You may need equipment. Anything that you need to get a piece of any task done. Assignments are about who's doing what. So that is really pretty specific to people. There are kinds of projects that are all about scheduling equipment, but that's not really what we're going to go into. So for our purposes, our assignments are going to be people. And the schedule is when the tasks are actually planned to start and end. Assumptions are what you and anyone else involved believe you know about a project. Assumptions are powerful and they can be dangerous in project management. So it's very important to ferret those all out at the beginning of a project and validate them so that everyone is starting from the same place. The 4 dials I've talked about briefly, and I've done actually a whole webinar on the 4 dials, and we will address this further in the next webinar. But the 4 dials is a tool to determine the balance among the 4 major aspects of any project. That's scope or content, cost or resource, quality, and schedule. And the goals. Why are you doing this work at all? What do you think you're going to get out of it? A vision is not exactly the goals. Goals are pretty finite and well stated. If you can get an actual picture, either painted in words or actually have a picture of what you think the completed effort will look like, that's very important. It's very motivating. It helps keep you on track. It helps everybody move in the same direction. They're all going after the same thing. So that's the basics that we wanted to cover. Now let's talk about the project that we're going to walk through, that's going to show us the core. The project is going to be organizing your garage. These concepts are the same no matter what you use them for. Organizing your garage, writing an iPhone app, whatever you're doing, the concepts are the same. So we're going to work with something that's pretty easy to understand. My assumptions for my project: I'm not going to get any professional assistance. I don't need a painter. I don't need a hauler. I don't need a professional organizer. However, I am assuming my spouse and teenage daughter are going to be part of this effort. Now you can see where that particular assumption is one that I better validate before I try to put a schedule together. And I think I'm going to spend some money on storage because I want this all to come together. I'm going to paint the inside of the garage. As long as I'm in there, I want to get this all done at once. But the goals of the project, really what I want to get out of this, I want to get rid of all the stuff in there that I'm not using. I want a workshop area where I can actually work, where I can put my tools. The stuff that I only use now and then, holiday decorations, paint, things like that, I want them out of the way. And we are a really active family, so I want my sporting goods organized so I can grab them and go. But I do still want to put my car in. So here's the vision. This is what my garage looks like now. And this is what I'd like it to look like. So you can see that picture is really going to help me focus. A miracle is going to occur in the middle, and that's what we're putting together. So let's talk first about the calendar. This is not the calendar on your wall. This is the calendar for the project. I'm going to do this over Labor Day. I'm in the US, and we have plans for Labor Day. We're going on a picnic, so we're not going to work on that day. That's a day off. We're going to take a week off. We're going to start work the weekend before. And if it goes longer than that week, we'll just continue on weekends. My daughter, and I've validated the assumption that she's going to help with this, she has a beach party planned in the middle of the week. So while my spouse and I are going to be working on the garage in the middle of the week, she's not going to be there that day. So don't plan for her to do something. And I'm not getting up at 5 in the morning to do this. But I will start working by 9, and we'll all work up to 10 hours a day to get this done, because we really want to get it done. We're just going to focus, and we're going to hammer it out. Okay? So that's our calendar. And I will show you how we're going to use that in a little while. But the major tasks, here's what we've got to do. We've got to get everything out of there. We've got to get rid of the stuff we're not keeping, and I plan to do recycle, give some stuff away, and throw stuff away. I expect I'm going to do all of those things. And then once we have left what we want to keep, we're going to do an inventory. We're going to paint the inside of the garage. Then we're going to create a workbench area and a sporting goods area, and we're going to store the rest of the stuff. So that's our major breakdown. Those are our major tasks. That's what we're going to have to do to get this done. So what I've done is we have set up that's not what I want to do. Let's do this. There are our major tasks. We're emptying out the garage, getting rid of the recycle, giveaway, and trash. I'm sorry, this may be a little difficult to see. It depends on what your resolution is. So I'm going to walk through these just so you can see. This says inventory what's left. This says paint the inside of the garage, create a workbench area, create a sporting goods area, and store occasional use objects. What you're looking at here is Microsoft Project. And this is kind of the premier project management tool. We'll go through more of this in a future webinar. We're going to do something on the tools, and we're actually going to go through Microsoft Project in a pretty detailed way. So let's go back. So you see, now we've got the major tasks, and we're going to break them down. To empty out the garage, I know I'm going to do recycle, give away, trash, keep. I want to have places to put those. I want to carry everything out, and then I want to sort everything into those places. And then we're going to get rid of the recycle, the giveaway, and the trash. So each one of those, we're going to put the recycle and trash in different bins. I know that I have what's considered toxic waste in my garage. And no, it's not like a toxic waste dump, but I've got paint in there, and I've got paint thinner, and I've got some oil. And where I live, you don't get to put that in the trash. You have to make an appointment and take it in. So I've got to make that appointment and drop it off, and then the giveaway is going to go to the thrift shop. I'm going to inventory what's left, which means not only am I going to see what's there, but as I'm doing that, I'm going to sort it into categories so that I can see how much space I'm going to have to use for my sporting goods and for my workbench area and that kind of thing. So I'm going to sort it into categories, and then I'm going to estimate how much space I'm going to need for each category. I'm going to paint the inside of the garage. That seems pretty straightforward, except it's really, there are some things that we have to do for that. We've got to pick a color. And then we've got to buy all the stuff we need to paint, brushes, tarp, the paint. We're going to clean the walls. We're going to tape them off, and then we're going to paint. For creating our workbench area, we've got to decide whether we're going to just buy a workbench already made or whether we're going to make it ourselves. And here are some assumptions that weren't called out, but that came up when we started breaking the tasks down, which is another good reason to get these tasks down to a more granular level. I want a pegboard for some of the tools. So I've got to get that pegboard and the pegs put on it, and I've got to put it up. Once I get all that done, I got to figure out what other storage I'm going to need besides the pegboard and the workbench itself. And I'm going to get that storage. Then I'm going to put the workbench in. I'm going to hang up the tools on the pegboard, and whatever's left over, I've got to store in that storage that I've just bought. Creating a sporting goods area. Some things can be put higher. For example, maybe I have tennis rackets or some other kind of rackets that can hang up, and I can grab them from the bottom. Maybe I don't want to hang my bike on the ceiling. So we're going to make those decisions. Then we're going to review, now that we've made what can go up, what needs to be within reach. We're going to look at what kind of storage we can use for that, because there's a lot of specialized storage for sporting goods. Then we're going to go buy it, and we're going to put stuff away. And the occasional use objects are similar, although we're going to sort them first, because occasional use objects is a pretty broad category, and we really do want to put the paint all together and the holiday decorations all together. So we're going to figure out how that's going to go and where there's going to be space for it. And we're going to buy the storage, and then we're going to put stuff away. So that was all the tasks. And that was the other thing that I was showing you. It's a little hard to see. I'm sorry about that. I hope your resolution's a little better than mine. But here's what it looks like. Here are my major tasks. You can see that they're highlighted. That's because they're groupings. They're task groupings. So empty out the garage, I have my subtasks actually underneath it. If I collapse this, I have a little expand collapse thing. It'll hide those, so I can go back to just seeing my major tasks, or I can see them all at once. So that's what it looks like when I get my tasks in there. Okay, we are moving right along. Well, let's not do that. Shut the whole thing down. Dependencies. These are really important. You'll see how they stack up within the project as we go along. Emptying out the garage, okay. I could set up places for recycle, giveaway, trash, and keep. I could set those up anytime. I don't actually really even have to have started on the project. I could do those the week before if they're not going to be in the way. Carrying everything out doesn't really depend on having those places. I can carry it out and put it in a big pile and sort it into those places later. So there's really not a dependency on that. You might feel differently about some of these dependencies. You might feel differently about some of these task breakdowns. That's actually pretty good, because I would highly recommend that you take this project and you start from the beginning and try it yourself. Break it all apart the way that you would do it, so you can see how it works, because you'll have a pretty good framework to start with. But all those things that you're already starting to say, well, I would want to have those places together, so I would put a dependency there. Great. Try it out. See how it works. I'm going to say that we're not sorting the contents till everything's carried out. It can't end, which means, so this is an end or finish to finish, an end-to-end dependency. What that means is I could start sorting the contents as soon as something's carried out, but I can't finish sorting the contents until after everything's carried out, because I've got to sort that last trip. So that's that dependency. Getting rid of recycle, trash, and giveaway. I'm not going to go through all of these in detail, but there are a couple that I want to call out. So you can see that some of these tasks have more than one dependency. And that's how things go. So to put the recycle in the bins, I need to actually have the bin set up. So it's got a finish to start for having my places for recycle and giveaway and trash and keep set up. And I can't start it till I start sorting the contents, because I don't know what's recycled. But after I start sorting, I can start right away. I'm putting the recycle in their places. So that's a start to start. And I have an end to end after sorting the contents, because if that last piece of the sort ends up with recycle, then I'll be putting that in the bin. Now, for start to start and finish to finish, you can schedule in a time lag. So, for example, if I'm not going to put stuff into the bins until an hour after I start sorting, then I can say it has a start to start dependency with a lag of an hour. And project and most of the tools let you put that lag in, so it will actually handle scheduling that for you. Trash in the bins looks a lot like recycle in the bins. The toxic waste appointment, assuming that I don't have to tell them exactly what I'm bringing in or how much, I can make that anytime. Obviously, there would be some dependencies there if I had to give them any of that information. Obviously, I can't drop it off until I have that appointment. And the giveaway to the thrift shop looks a lot like getting the recycle and trash in the bins. So I'm going to inventory what's left. I can't start sorting things into categories until I actually know what's left. So I have to wait until sorting the content ends. And once I have the categories, I can estimate the space. Painting the inside of the garage, I could pick a color anytime, but I can't really buy the paint till I know what color I'm buying. I don't want to try to clean the walls until everything is carried out. There's no sense in starting to tape until after I've cleaned the walls, because I'm taping over dirt. And finally, I'm not going to paint until after I finish taping. Now, I will say, when you look at the schedule, I'm assuming that I have tape. We'll get to that, but I'm assuming that I actually have the tape on hand. Creating a workbench area. Deciding on making or buying, we can do that anytime. But we don't want to actually get the workbench or the materials until after we estimate the space, because then we know what's going to fit there. Now, the pegboard and pegs, again, we can get them as soon as we've estimated the space and we know where it's going to be. But we really don't want to put it up until we get the workbench there. So it's looking out of order here. That really does not matter as far as the project plan, because the dependencies are going to help determine in what order the tasks and subtasks are going to be completed. So even though it's lower or it's higher in the list than installing the workbench, it doesn't matter because we're going to account for that with priorities. We don't want to put it up till the workbench is up and we see exactly where the workbench is going to go. It will save us a lot of time and trouble. I think everything else is pretty clear. I've got installing the workbench starting after you've painted the walls. And really, we definitely would want to put a lag in there. Give it an hour or two to dry. We don't want to plan to put this thing in with wet paint on the walls. Let's see, creating a sporting goods area. That's pretty straightforward. You can't decide what needs to go where until you actually have everything in categories. And you can't figure out the storage options till you decide how you want to store it, or where you want to store it. And you can't really buy the storage till you know what you're going to buy. So that's all pretty much the same. Storing the occasional use objects is very like creating the sporting goods area. Nothing tricky there, nothing different there. But now we have all the dependencies laid out, and obviously you can do this on a piece of paper. This is great. This works just fine. And there's the rest of our storing the occasional use objects. Now, here's the tricky thing. The dependencies. Look at this. Since we don't know how long anything takes, when it's scheduled, when project has scheduled everything for me, doesn't really matter. But I've put in the dependencies, and this is how project works. And we'll talk more about this when we get to the tools. But I'm saying that sort the contents is dependent on task 3, which is carry everything out. FF is finish to finish. It puts no notation if it's finish to start, because that's the majority of dependencies are going to be something has to finish before something else starts. And you can put lags in for any of these. You can see we have this start to starts, and you can also see how multiple dependencies look when you put them out here. So I have put those all in. Let's talk a little bit about this calendar. Just the time scale. So the time scale that we're looking at, because of the kind of work we're doing, is hourly. Your projects probably, unless it's this kind of a project, anything longer term, you're not going to want to look at by the hour. You're going to want to look at by the day or by the week. You're not going to have this much data. We'll talk a little more about the calendar when we get a little further, but this is the graphical representation of dependencies, and this is how they're shown. If something comes off the beginning of a bar, and this is true in most of the tools, then that is a start to something dependency, right? Because this is the start of the task. If it comes off the end, then it's a finish to something dependency. So you can see here's a finish to finish dependency. This finishes, this finishes. We didn't put any lag in there. And sometimes the lag may be small enough that it just, if your lag, if the end of carrying things out and the end of sorting, is a couple minutes, there's really, it's going to buy us nothing to put that dependency, that lag in there. It's not really going to change anything substantially. So what you want to do, and this is true throughout project planning, you want to take it to the lowest level of detail that's sensible, that's going to buy you something, that's going to mean something and be worth the work, not just something that's going to clutter it up so that you can have lots of details. That can be very overwhelming, and you lose a lot of clarity doing it that way. So get it down to a granular level that makes sense, and you'll know what that is when you're in the midst of it. And we'll show you some other things that illustrate that. But let's look at duration. So here's what you can see, that I've done this in hours or portions of hours, how long I think each thing's going to take, and how many people are going to be doing that. So for example, carrying everything out, I think it's going to take 2 people 3 hours. It's going to take start to end 3 hours as long as 2 people are working on that, which means if I only had 1 person working on it, then it would take 6 hours according to this. You might not agree with the durations. That's all okay. We're not going to worry about that. So you can see the whole way through here, sorting the contents. I think 3 people should do that. Recite. So this becomes important. And when you're putting this together for something that's very close to you, like organizing, cleaning out your garage for your with your family, you're going to actually have some other stuff in mind about things like sorting the contents. Like, we all need to help with this. One person can't do it. Hold on just a second here. So that's let's see if I can't. Let's stop this a minute. Sorry about the noise. It's a noisy day in my neighborhood today. Let's go on. Let's just go on. We will be fine. So you see how this duration goes. Sometimes the number of people I want are because I need multiple people involved, right? There are decisions that need to be made, and I know that I'm going to need multiple people. Sometimes I just know that multiple people can do this. I may not know which people, but I know that multiple people can do it. Sorry about that. So things like painting, I'm thinking 3 people, for example, and the duration, I may have taken some extra information in when I'm doing duration, and that's okay. It's nice to call it out if you can, but maybe it doesn't buy you anything. So for example, for painting, maybe I'm thinking 2 coats, and I think that 2 coats is going to take me 3 hours to put up and to get dried. And so I just put 3 hours for that task, because breaking it out into 2 tasks doesn't really buy me anything. The only time that's going to buy me something is if I'm doing some contingency planning, if it's raining and the paint isn't going to dry or something like that. But I could just roll that into this 3 hours. So your durations can come from a number of different places, and they're all coming out of your head, really. And so the more information you have, the better it is. If you can articulate why, especially if this is not something like your own personal project, something that has family or close friends together, even in that case, if you can lay it out and say, well, painting, I think, is going to take 3 hours, and your family says, well, wait a minute, we got to put 2 coats, so is it going to take 6 hours? And if you have written down somewhere, or you've identified ahead of time that's for 2 coats, then you're past that, right? You're not arguing about it. You're not trying to remember it. So when you make that, think of it as an assumption, and you can have task assumptions. And that's it. If you have them, write them down, call them out so that everyone understands. It will save you a lot of time in explaining when you're talking about your project plan to people, and it's going to make your project plan more accurate. So you see that I've put a duration on everything and a number of people. The number of people is going to help me with the assignments. A lot of times, not always, but a lot of times in projects, if you have different people working on different aspects of a task, you'll actually break the task down a little further, but that's not always true. This is an excellent case where there's no need to break it into 2 tasks. There are no dependencies. The whole thing's going to be done when the whole thing's done, and the people who are working on it are actually working together, right? They're sharing the task. There's no division of labor within the task. And so on we go. We've got all the durations. And you can see where you're going to get a lot better information on the durations, a lot better predictions, So a lot more accurate project plan if you can break it down to a more granular level, because you are really including everything that's involved in a task into subtasks, and you're getting dependencies for those subtasks that you might not have identified if you hadn't identified the subtasks, if you hadn't broken it down to that level. So that's what getting it down to a more granular level buys you, and this is a really good illustration of that. So what happens when we add duration to our project plan? Now we get stuff in a little closer, right? Now I've put the duration in project in all of the tools. Really, you just plop them in, whatever it is. These are all hours. I've told it they're all hours. You're going to have a little trouble reading that, I think, unless that's my own screen resolution over there. But each of these, this says 3 hours. So what will happen is when you put the duration in for the subtasks, your tool will add them up for the task. So you can see where for anything particularly complex, that a tool is really going to take a lot of the burden off of you, and it's going to be a lot less error prone. The tool does not make decisions for you. The tool only does basically calculations for you. So you still have to do the thinking work, but this takes a lot of what I think of as the manual labor involved in putting a project plan together using tools. Takes a lot out of that. So here's what our plan is looking like now. You can see that we are ending. When are we ending? We are ending. Right now, we're going to end. We're going to do it all in a day, 2 days, 2 days. We're going to do it all in 2 days. Now, we don't have people in here yet. So let's talk a little bit about our assignments. And these assignments are matching the number of people. So some of the pertinent things here, for emptying out the garage, I want to put the places for recycle and give away and trash and keep. I just want to deal with that. My husband and daughter can carry everything out. Woohoo. And we're all going to sort the contents, but I may go through, I may do a pre-sort or something like that. But I know that because there are things in that garage that belong to each of us, everyone's going to want to say in sorting the contents. So while one person certainly could, and it might be more efficient, you know, because everybody will carry things out and then everyone will sort them. Or it might be more efficient to have one person carry it out, like have my husband carry it out, my daughter and I sort. I know that that's not going to get me the best result. So it's not all about how fast can we do it. Remember, if you took some of the earlier webinars, if you were in on them and listened to them, there is a balance between efficiency and effectiveness when you're putting together a project plan and executing on that project plan. And so this is where one of those places where I've got all of us sorting the contents, where that's going toward effectiveness. It's maybe not the most efficient thing, but it's going to get me the best result. And so that's how I want to do it. And then we're all going to be throwing stuff in the bins. I'm going to make the toxic waste appointment. My husband can go drop it off. Now I've put car here. That's not an assignment. That's a resource. And I am assuming for the sake of this project plan that we have 2 cars. So it's not a problem. But if our family had 1 car, and I've got me going to the thrift shop and my husband dropping off toxic waste, we would have to take into account the fact that that car can only be used for one of those things at a time when we're scheduling. So that puts a restriction on us because of equipment. It doesn't actually for this project plan, because I didn't want to get into that much detail. In Microsoft Project, it would get a little difficult to really interpret if you hadn't seen it before. But we have 2 cars, so it's not a problem. But it could have been a problem if it were just 1 car, and that's where you get into the other resources that you have to account for. So I'm going to the thrift shop because my husband doesn't deal well with thrift shops, and my daughter will come home with more than she took, for example. So there are some practical considerations, some skill set considerations when you're making assignments. All the people that you have available to assign, that's called your resource pool. The car, if there were only 1 car, that could be in the resource pool as well. So I'm going to sort what's left into categories. Yes, we could have all three of us. I'm not getting rid of anything. 3 people sorting into categories means it would be considerably less efficient and potentially less effective. So there was a decision that went on there. No one cares about the inside of the garage color except me, so I don't worry about that. I'd like my husband, though, to go to the store while I clean the walls. He can tape because I don't like to do that. But we've got 3 walls, and everybody wants to paint, so we're all going to paint. And that goes to efficiency. And it's no less effective, so it's a perfect trade-off. No one's going to be doing anything while we're painting anyway. Let's see, make or buy. So you see the car comes in a lot. My daughter wants to hang stuff on the pegboard, and she wants to help work, put the workbench in. So some of this is preference. When you make assignments on a project, take preference into account as much as is possible for the project, remembering that the project is the reason everybody's there. So you really need to get things accomplished. Nothing else really here. But here's what happens when we add the resources. Our time moves out a bit because we can't have someone doing 2 things at once. That's not going to work. And so this is one of the nice things about the tools, is that they'll then take those into account. We have a whole set of resource functions, and it will schedule based on the resources. And you can see this big blank spot. This is Labor Day. Remember when we talked about the calendar, we said that was a holiday and we had plans? You see that nothing is scheduled on Labor Day. So now we've moved out from the end of Monday. You see that the daughter is scheduled for nothing on Wednesday because we also put that in the calendar. She's not available. So now we've moved out to mid-Friday. So we've gone from 2 days to a week, basically. And that's what we want to see. That's why you do a project plan. You know how much time it's going to take. You know who's doing what when. So I want to talk briefly about contingency. In our next webinar, we're going to get more deeply into it. But when you're putting together the core part of a project plan, you need to have some idea of what it is. Contingency is what you do if things don't go according to plan. And so for risky parts of the project, you want to do some planning in advance so you know what you're going to do if that part of the project goes wrong, so that you schedule things for longer than best case if you think there's a significant risk of not a best case happening. For example, if you have a significant risk of rain, for when you're painting, you may want to have a dehumidifier or fans on hand, and you might want to make that task longer. If you get done more quickly, great, you move forward. And if you don't, then it's okay. You'll understand that that was a risk that was there. So what's the whole thing look like? Let's see if we've got, nope, we've got it. Once we get the resources we have, I think the whole thing. Yes. So we've got the whole thing. We have taken our goals and our vision. We have identified and validated our assumptions. We've figured out our major tasks. We've broken them out into smaller tasks. We've figured out how long each task is going to take. We have determined the dependencies that the tasks have among each other, and we've assigned people to them. Along with that, we've started out with a calendar that we've taken into account as we schedule the tasks, and now we have a project plan. So that's the core. That's how you put a project plan together. There are a few additional pieces that are pretty important that we're going to cover in our next webinar. But out of this, the things that you want to remember You want to start with your goals, your assumptions, and your vision. Those are your basic building blocks. Break it down as far as sensible. We talked a lot about as far as sensible. The more granular you get, the better estimates you're going to be able to have, and the better you're going to be able to identify the dependencies. But you don't want to waste time on such a detailed level that getting to that level doesn't buy you anything. You want to know who can complete each task, and you're going to take into consideration their skills, their availability, and their own. What do they want to do? Assuming that they're actually capable of doing it. That's, you know, having my daughter paint a wall in the garage if she's never done that before. Understand what other resources, like the car, like the tarp and the paint and the brushes, what all are you going to need to complete each task. If you do it at a task level, you have a pretty good list. If you do it at a much higher level, like a project level, without looking at the tasks, you're likely to miss something. You need to know which tasks are dependent on which other tasks. You got to have some idea how long each task will take. The less sure you are, we haven't talked much about this, but I do want to mention it, the less sure you are about how long a task is going to take, the bigger you're going to make it. The more time you're going to give. That's part of the contingency planning that we're going to go through, but you want to do that. Also, you may start with an initial estimate, and then once you figure out who's going to do each one, you're going to ask them, how long do they think it's going to take? You're going to ask an expert, or you're going to ask the person doing the job, so that you get a good estimate. Cleaning out the garage, you know, right, that you're an expert. You can do that. You're not always going to be the subject matter expert for every project that you plan. And so you need to have those experts on hand, or you need to have the task assignments early so that you can get good estimates. Right? So rinse and repeat. You will adjust the project, right? When we saw the project plan, I might pick that up and look at it and say, well, maybe I don't want my daughter to do this part. Maybe it would be better if I did this part so she can do this other thing, so we don't have this dependency based on who's doing things. So since we can each do one at a time, look, I have some downtime here. I'm not doing anything. Let's change the assignments around. So you can play that kind of game. And if you're using a tool, that kind of game becomes pretty simple. So let's wait a minute, see if anybody has any questions. Got a little bit of a lag here. Okay, we have a question on what if something, what if you find that something's going to take longer than you originally expected? You haven't started on it yet, but you have new news about how long it's going to take. Well, it's going to take longer. It's going to take longer. If you're using a tool, you put your extended duration into that plan, and you take a look at it, and you see what it does to the project plan. If it sends it out past a schedule you can work with, then you start looking at, can I move resources around to get this done more efficiently? Are there tasks that I really don't have to do? They're not necessary. That's a Moscow, if you do a Moscow rating, a must, should, could, and won't rating, then you can shuffle a little more easily. So you may have to move things around. You may see if you can break something down to a more granular level so that you can get multiple people working on different parts of it at the same time. So durations will change. You will get new news. You'll get that weather report that there's going to be rain, and you got to switch things up. It's part of what happens, and we will talk more about it in the next webinar about adjusting to change. Anything else? What about changing assignments, changing who's going to do it? Sometimes that happens. Someone wins the lottery, they're gone. Your daughter has the opportunity to go to some event that she really, really would like to go to. You take her out of the equation. You reassign things. What you have to watch for in the projects is that when you reassign something, or if you don't reassign something, if my daughter is the absolute expert and we can't do something without her, then we may look at our dependencies and see if we can shuffle things around there, or we may just extend the project. But if you're going to replace someone on a project, you know, if I'm going to have my mom come and help paint and do the things my daughter was going to do, you need to make sure that the skill set is comparable. You know, maybe my mom can't carry things out. Maybe she's got a bad back, so that's not going to work. We're going to have to shuffle things around, or something may take longer if someone doesn't have the same level of skill, so you need to adjust the duration. Or maybe you just don't have anyone else to fill that gap, and you're going to have to play around with the dependencies and the scheduling as much as you can, and then you're going to have to extend the schedule or eliminate something. So things happen, and again, we'll talk more about that in the next webinar. But absolutely, you will have to make adjustments, and so you should just be aware that that's going to happen, and be prepared for it. And as a project manager, you have to roll with the punches a certain amount. You know, if someone is sick, they're sick. You know, deal with it. There's nothing that you can do about it. You don't want them to come in and work sick. You need to figure out how you're going to react to that. That's part of project management. There's a constant shuffle. It's not all about setting up pretty project plans. It really is about constant adjustment. Other questions? No? Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about the upcoming webinar. We have 3 more left in our basics series. We've got the dimensions, in which we're going to talk about that 4 dials tool. We're going to talk about change management, about adjusting, a little bit about what we talked about today. We'll have a session on the tools where I'll introduce and demo a number of tools on different platforms. And we're going to have a running the gamut session where we will take a project from beginning to end in a tool. And then after that, we've got the advanced project management. These are all really practical. We're always going to run through examples, so I hope to see and hear you there.